Hey, thanks for joining us again. We continue our day-long updates here back at our headquarters at the Georgia Chamber Studios in Atlanta. And I'm joined by Commissioner of Insurance and our Fire Safety Commissioner, John King. Thank you for taking the time to
Thank
be
you,
over
Chris.
here. Appreciate what you're doing around the state. We're really trying to get a sense for particularly folks in West Georgia and Atlanta that haven't seen the TV images, that haven't been on the ground like you've been on the ground. The extent of this damage is so overwhelming, it's hard for folks to imagine. Can you share a little bit with us, Commissioner, about what you've actually seen? Because let me preface it, your role as a general, you've been in the front line of a lot of disaster
Yes, I've done
preparedness, right? And
a lot of
response.
responses over 42 years of
Right.
service. I think it here in the Metro Atlanta, we don't get a sense because we really dodged a major bullet. If you look at the line of Valdosta to Augusta, basically diagonally across our state, that whole area has just been, the massive amount of destruction, the loss of power, significantly the loss of power. And when we lose power, we lose our ability to produce water, to take care of being able to make sure that our hospitals are,
Right.
I saw the tower at the airport in Valdosta. All the windows in the tower are blown out. So that automatically that airport then becomes non-functional, and so all those and of course this 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 not only the tornadoes but also the hurricane, the effects hit parts of Georgia they're not used to getting that kind of damage.
Right.
Coastal Georgia, even Southwest Georgia, over the years that they understand the storm, but nothing has ever been able to go across our state at a Category 2.
Right.
That level of power is just immense. Luckily, luckily the storm was very fast, and so that created either a lot of destruction, but we didn't get the water.
Right.
The challenge we had is we had a rainstorm prior that sat on top of North Georgia, and that's what we had the flooding events here in Atlanta and in parts of our state. And so the ground was so soft and saturated with water, trees started coming down. And when we lose trees, we lose power lines. Tremendous amount of effort going on by our Georgia Power and our EMCs restoring power. They're an army operation. It is
Right.
is incredible the amount of technology. Chris Carr and I were 2 days ago in Augusta. We met a line crew, and these tough-looking guys out there with all they're tired. They are smoked. Young woman as an engineer. She is the line chief of that crew, and she is the electrical engineer is designing what pole gets replaced. Over 600 poles have been replaced. But just in areas, and that's significant.
Yeah, we heard from Georgia Power that just in their system alone, 8,000 poles.
Yes.
The most they'd ever had before was 2,000. Just to put that in perspective, I'm curious, as you've gone out there, we know the damage to trees. Commissioner Harper talked about the damage to crops, which is
Yes.
just devastating for our commodity sector. Have you seen more damage on the home front, on housing, or in businesses, or is it just a mix?
It is too early to be able to tell that.
Okay.
We know, like, if you go to downtown Valdosta
Right.
was flattened. I mean, the destruction in Valdosta was tremendous, especially in a heavily populated area. In Augusta, a little bit less, but as the storm came through Georgia, it got wider and wider and wider, and so that destruction in communities like Nashville and Berrien County, where my family's from,
Yeah.
those areas that don't have, and people don't realize their emergency operations centers in many of these communities is one guy,
Right.
one woman who's the assistant fire chief who has other full-time job, and after 48 hours or 24 hours, that person is smoked.
Yeah.
And so, GEMA, the National Guard, all our partners had to go into these communities and help stand up again their emergency operations centers. We have some legislators right now who are running in emergency operations meetings.
Right.
And so our legislators are doing a tremendous job of rolling their sleeves up and getting to work.
And I tell you that there's an area. I mean, you're from Berrien County. I'm from Ben Hill County. Clinch County, just next door to both of us, that whole area really has been isolated. We're starting to get some power back there, but they're not going to be on the front page of any newspaper. They're not going to be in the news, but those rural communities through there really did take it hard.
And this is one of the things that I've learned over the years as a National Guard officer and responded to numerous, and even spent time in Puerto Rico doing Maria. Just because you don't hear from a community, that doesn't mean that all is well in that community. That just means that that one person, they either isolated because there's no cell service, because we lost a tremendous number of cell towers. But just because we don't hear from one community we should not assume that that community is fine.
Right.
Because that just means that they're out of contact.
And it goes the other way too. Just because you haven't heard from somebody doesn't mean we don't know that you're in trouble.
That's
right. I've told people over and over again, the power companies know every single down business in the state.
And there's a danger sometimes that as you're bringing in resources, just because a community is generating a ton of requests, we have to make sure that we're not leaving, And so that's why the system of GMA and Incident Command works. First of all, establish clear routes to critical facilities, hospitals, fire stations, places where we need first responders to be, and then start expanding from there.
Right.
And so we build these, access to these islands, and then we start working out.
So let's talk about specifically your role as insurance commissioner.
Yes.
It's going to be a huge insurance impact. I mean, it's way too soon to tell what the financial impact of this storm is going to be on Georgia. But what recommendations do you have as a small business owner or a guy running a plant or even our homeowners that are out there as they look at this damage? What do you recommend to them?
First of all, only do the necessary repairs to prevent further damage.
Okay.
First, like if it means putting a tarp, but don't get into a long-term contract and start repairs. And we're Georgians. We want to jump in with both hands and start getting those. And that is, it goes contrary to how we are built and wired. We want to get in there, get back on and what I tell folks, do only the necessary repairs to prevent further damage. Document. Get in touch with your agent, or at least file a claim.
And we know those guys are out there. We know State Farm's on the ground.
Oh, they are. And
they're out there, right?
I called every one of our carriers there, and we're going to be, and I will be talking a little bit about where we're setting up claims villages.
Okay.
And we're going to get, not a single insurance company has been hesitant at all. They're already working these areas. A lot of the challenges that we're having in Georgia is because we're out of contact, no power, no cell, and so people can't get their claims. We put out a regulatory notice that we advise all the insurance companies that they cannot cancel anyone for non-payment until we can reestablish, because it's, imagine we have post offices, they're closed. You can't get on the cell phone and pay and insurance bills are due. And so typically, people would get canceled. Well, we're telling insurance companies not to cancel people's policies. Every insurance company is ready. They're already working the areas. But for example, tomorrow we're going to be in Valdosta. We're setting up a claims village at the Home Depot. We've set up a claims village in the previous storm there. People are buying supplies.
Right.
And so this is a natural place where everybody will come. You drive in, there'll be flags with insurance companies, and you just pull in there. They'll even do the claims from your vehicle if you have damage in your vehicle. They'll have adjusters there to basically work up the claim.
Wow.
And we will do the same on Friday in Augusta.
Okay.
And then later next week, and we're still working with the local authorities, we will be somewhere in Vidalia or Dublin to try to cover that area. So we're moving. As soon as the area is clear and we have access, we're bringing insurance companies. And that's how we're getting people back on their feet.
So if you can't contact your insurance company, just wait.
Yeah.
We're coming near you. When you talk about, I want to make sure we define this. When you talk about documentation.
Yes.
I was on a call yesterday with our Southeastern state chambers and the feds, and take photos, save receipts, save receipts. Is that?
Absolutely. Save them on your phone, save them on the cloud. I mean, that's what we tell people before a storm. Photograph the condition of your property. Photograph the key, valuables that you have. Documents that they're not easily replaceable. save them on the cloud. Take a picture of them, save them on your phone, save them on the cloud. That way you have them accessible. And if you had to redeploy, if you had to evacuate, you have them, you have
Right.
access to them.
That's a great point. I mean, we don't think about that. I was literally spent time yesterday on the phone with an electrician
Oh,
about
yes.
putting in a generator at my house just because I've seen what's
Yeah,
happened
yeah, yes.
elsewhere and the difficulties there. And so you've got the claim villages that you're setting up. People need to document. What other resources are available from your office and on the website out there?
Our consumer services division is fully staffed and running. We will take consumer services agents with us and establish a claims village. So if somebody is not getting, if they have a complaint on one of the insurance carriers, they're there. Our folks are there to answer and to kind of mitigate any issues that we may have. One of the other areas that we're concerned, so many people rent property, rent
Mm.
apartments, and a lot of people don't take advantage of getting a renter's insurance policies. People don't realize that the owner of the building has insurance, but that's just to protect the structure and their property, not the
Mm.
contents of a renter, especially with all the college students in Augusta and all
Yeah.
that. I would urge people to really consider getting renter's insurance to protect your stuff. And honestly, after a response like this, it's important for us to kind of reflect. Okay, first of all, as a government agency, what are the things that we did well? What are the things that we need to improve? Because
Mhm.
we're going to have more events as we come. But I also urge families and small business owners to have that moment of reflection.
Right.
How do we prepare? Do we have the adequate insurance coverage? A lot of people say, you know what, I have this coverage, but I don't see ever needing it. I wish I would have had this other coverage.
Yes.
And so this is a time to have a reflection. Okay, do I have the adequate coverage? And also, and see what companies perform
Sure.
admirably, what companies faltered and did not. And this is a
Yeah.
time for a business decision to decide, you know what, I'm going to shop around for somebody that can do a better job.
Right. Well, I think you make a good point. I think every small business needs to have that resilience and that recovery plan in place, whether
Yes.
it's a cyber attack or it's a natural disaster. You have to
Absolutely.
be ready. I'm curious. I had a conversation with one chamber, damage to their building. They said, "Hey, we've got insurance to cover X, Y, and Z," but they had flooding. And they didn't have flooding insurance. And I know we talked earlier about the federal level. I know it's a huge issue in Florida. Talk to me about flood insurance and what's happening at the national level.
And that is what, the federal government provides a national flood insurance program, it's called. It is the basic insurance. It is not a panacea that will solve all your damages. There's private flood insurance, but it's expensive.
Yes.
And so very few Georgians take advantage of flood insurance. And I understand a small business is trying to make that assessment. What do I spend my capital in?
Yeah.
But in the areas and very few, unless you buy that specific policy, most insurers will not cover flood. Now, they will cover wind damage, and so it's important to be able to describe that's why the photographing is important.
Right.
Is this was caused wind damage, and when you have an adjuster arrive and sees the damage, okay, this was caused by wind, this was caused by a tree falling down, it was not caused by flood. In making that difference, people don't realize, auto insurance. Your auto insurance, if your car gets damaged, the auto insurance will cover. It's actually better for coverage when you have like a flood,
Right.
because if a car gets flooded out, the coverage most of the time will take care of it. But homeowners will not, and business insurers will not,
Right.
typically, unless you buy that kind of policy. And that's and it's a hard choice. And the problem is if you buy insurance, it doesn't take into effect until 30 days later.
Sure.
And so a lot of people want to buy flood insurance as the storm is barreling across the Gulf of Mexico.
Right.
That's too late. And so I'll caution people when they're making that decision is you have to find, it has to form part of your calculus on your coverage.
Well, and I think too, what we've seen happen in Western North Carolina, those guys didn't have flood insurance. Top of a mountain, never thought they would need it.
Thought.
But you made the point earlier when we were getting ready about the federal government has to reauthorize the national flood insurance, correct?
Yes, every session, the flood insurance program has a certain amount of a budget, and when they start running, and they're running it because we had several storms, catastrophic storms, not only, and it's a nationwide program. this is where I urge our congressional delegation. This should be a bipartisan issue. And I know it's part of the discussion on the continuing resolution, but I urge our congressional delegation, please take serious note of reauthorizing and funding the National Flood Insurance Program, because there's going to be a great deal of Georgians that are going to need that coverage. And that's where FEMA comes in.
Right.
To, not only FEMA, but also has a piece of it. It also touches the Small Business Administration for the small, loans. All those things are wrapped into that response. And that's really where a lot of people think that the state government is competing against the federal government about who responds. They're complementary of each other. The local, state, county system deals with the immediate 24, 48, 72 hours as resources build on each other. And then the federal government is supposed to come in and help us out, relieve. And by then we know where the areas is the most affected, and that's where we can bring the federal resources. There's not a competition. This is about complementing each other.
And you made the point, and I want to reiterate it. This is not a partisan issue. And I appreciate the members of our congressional delegation, particularly Austin Scott and Senator Ossoff, worked together to get the emergency declaration signed by President Biden, expanded it the next day thanks to Governor Kemp calling again, and he'll say, I'll call again and again and again. But it is truly, I think this is where we do see the best of us, right? The better angels come out in these difficult times.
This is why we ran for office, is for days like these, where people across our state looking for the government to be there with them, rolling their sleeves up. And we are not going to leave these communities until we're done. And the governor was very clear. I will continue to be very clear. Our agents out there protecting communities, because now we have a bunch of fraudsters coming into these communities and promising to do all kinds of work. And and these people are not from our state. They follow these storms. And we're out there policing that as well. We're working very closely with every sheriff, with every district attorney, and we're committed that we're going to do everything we can to protect Georgians, especially those who are the most vulnerable.
Absolutely. One last question, because I know you want this opportunity. You're very close to our fire teams around the state, but also to our National Guards men and women that have been deployed. What do you have to say about them and their performance over the last week here?
I tell you, I cannot be more proud of our team. Once you leave the service and you leave the National Guard, you feel, well, will this next generation be as committed? Not a doubt in my mind. Those young men and women are working their tails off, and I just cannot be more proud of them. I'm the cheerleader on the side of the road, cheerleading them, because they know that we train and deploy overseas to fight wars and all that. But anytime we get a chance to serve in our communities, especially along those firefighters, those first responders, people working without rest, or a couple hours of sleep. They're sleeping in their cars, their trucks, their Humvees. And you know what? Incredibly proud.
And their families are at home with no power, with downed trees.
Many of them left their homes. There were no power to go help somebody else. And so this is a proud day for Georgians, and I am just proud to be part of the solution.
Thank you for what you've done. Thank you for what you're going to do. We're going to be your partner. We're going to amplify everything you're doing. Anything that we can do to connect with our local chamber partners, our local development authority friends, and local businesses, that's what we're here to do. And we're going to be here as long as this takes. This is not a 1 week or a 2 week recovery. This could be months and months, if not years in some places, right?
I'll tell you, Chris, I think if anybody that wants to help, who's not in the affected area, this is an area where we need some help. Supporting our food banks. They are producing a tremendous amount of food to bring to those communities as we get power restored. Chris Carr and myself unloaded a trailer full of water 2 days ago, and we're taking enough Advil now to recover from that. But when you have 2 constitutional officers out there serving water and food with these great volunteers, that right there is where the immediate need is. And so I urge anybody that can help support our food banks, Salvation Army, the Red Cross, please think of that.
All right, and we'll have all of those resources on our website, www.gachamber.com, and you can go there and get all those resources, including what's happening at the Insurance Commissioner's Office and places for you to make a difference. So, Commissioner, thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you guys for joining us today.